Yeah, I'll be right back. If you're watching the recording, things will start up in about 8 minutes, so you can fast forward that far.
methods class thing again. Yep.
But it's like a draft. So let me know what you think.
I mean, it's 4 cars. I was
My clock reads 5:58, so we're gonna get started in about 2 minutes. Okay, my clock is reading 6 o'clock. So I'll start going over some preliminary things while a few people come on in. This is being recorded. It worked really well last week. So I am anticipating being able to get that posted up for you again Similar to last week, it looks like Zoom is working relatively well with YouTube. I probably will put up a Zoom link, a direct Zoom link like I did just to get that up a little smidge faster if you need it to be, and then get that more permanent link up a little bit after that. Just a reminder for everyone, the way you want to be is with your camera on and your microphone off, unless you're asking a direct question. That is just the way that helps me the most. Yeah, I see some of you are in the dorms now. Good for you. That works for you. Oh, I have a little pile of people trying to get in. Okay, good. What else? Next week, don't forget, we are not having class, and I'll say this again toward the end. We're not having class at this normal time of Monday at 6. We are going to be doing the sociology movie night thing that is going to combine you with, if I remember correctly, 5 Soc 101 classes. We're going to be watching a movie together. It's just an idea I had to, at least on a subconscious level, give kind of a collective learning experience to a whole bunch of people all at once. We're going to be watching a documentary on North Korea. Tonight's culture of the week is North Korea. So I'm going to be talking about that a little bit in a way that is helpful. Yes, if you can't find the microphone, it's on the bottom left. It's the little guy that says mute under it. Well, for me, it says mute. For you, yeah, actually, it says mute under it. What else? I think I got through most of my email for your class about half an hour ago. I think most things, if I haven't addressed anything, that means I missed it. So please ask again. There were some people having some minor tech issues with finding things on Blackboard or just knowing where stuff. If you have that stuff, please let me know. Usually we can figure that stuff out without IT's help. Sometimes we can't. I think that's about it for the general announcement stuff. Does anyone have any questions? No? No, I don't see any questions. Okay. It's amazing how dorms never change what they look like. Cool. So let me shift around my windows a little bit. We are going to get directly into lecture tonight. Just let me put things where I want them to be. Oops. Give me about 60 seconds. There are all your faces. Putting myself in. And it's really like Zoom actively doesn't want to be compatible with PowerPoint. It's really an amazing. Okay, that's where I want to be. Very good. Okay, anyway. Slightly, that's slightly right. good enough. Okay, so tonight is it's almost entirely lecture. There's a little bit of discussion at the top, but that's most of what we're doing tonight. I am not sure how long this is going to take because this is a brand new lecture, which is always fun. It certainly won't take more than 3 hours. I don't think it's going to take 3 hours, so we might cut out a little bit early. I just don't know for sure. So right now, this is material from Chapter 3. This week's quiz is on Chapter 3, and this basically is laying the foundations for what exactly culture is. Last time we talked about what is social science and what are the social sciences. We're developing off of that tonight, and we're also doing a smidge of, so we're just continuing where we left off. So our agenda for this evening is we're going to discuss body ritual of the Nasarama just a little bit. Then we're going to talk about culture in terms of biology and society. Then we'll talk about ethnocentrism and how that works and what it is. And then finally, we will look at our culture of the week, which is North Korea. So let's talk about the body ritual of the Nasarama. There was some interesting discussion that happened. Well, not discussion yet. This week is the discussion of this. But I looked at a few of your papers, and your responses were just about what we expect from this. If you don't necessarily know this piece, you might not know that that was a satire piece. That Nasarama is America backwards. It's just a fun little trick that we have been playing on freshmen in and all kinds of people in the social sciences for about the last 50 years or so. It's a bit outdated of a piece, so we'll talk about that a smidge. We're going to have a little bit of limited discussion here now, so get ready to click off the mutes on your pieces. But and I like to do discussions like this because I know you wrote something about it, right? We had an assignment writing something about it. So does anyone have anything to say about the piece right off the bat?
I feel really dumb because I didn't realize it until I was already in my closing paragraph. And it was like in real time as I was writing it, and I was like, it's American spelled backwards. Oh my God, I look so stupid. Yeah, so that really hurt my feelings.
Oh, no. It's totally fine. We've been doing this to people for a very long time. None of you should feel silly about this because I took Social 101 my senior year of high school, and then I took it again when I got to college, just basically to see, well, what's the college version of this, right? Well, my instructor in college didn't know it was satire either. So we informed her while she was teaching. So yeah, that was kind of a wild moment I'll never forget. Any other reactions like that?
I feel like that's kind of the, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh. I was just saying I didn't realize it was American backwards either.
Yeah. No, it's very, well, like American is a long enough of a word that it's kind of easy to hide. So it's fun that way. What were you going to say, Nisa?
Naziha. I was just going to say, I feel like it's kind of, in a way, maybe a written out way of seeing what a person's initial reactions are when they see or learn about something that they're unfamiliar with.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's the point. It's definitely written in the style of like obtuse academia, right? Like I was reviewing it this afternoon while I was eating my lunch, and like my eyes glazed over almost immediately, right? Because it's just written in that kind of overly world style that academia does some. Yeah, yeah, totally. Other comments? Has anyone seen this before and knew about it ahead of time? I'd like to know where those come from.
Yeah, I'd already read it before.
In what class?
It was an intro to sociology class.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah, intro to soc. It's a pretty classic intro to soc piece. Yeah, totally. Anyone else?
I've read it. You can go.
Go ahead.
I think I read it back in like 7th grade for some reason in history. I don't know why, but
Yeah, that's pretty advanced for 7th grade. That means you went to a good school. I certainly did not. Hannah, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I read it my first year here at Otterbein in a different INST. It was called like Women's Communities. So we read that.
Sure. Yeah, it's a real super classic social studies / social science piece. Anyone that didn't read it ahead of time, did anyone get it immediately? Did you just lightning see it?
I saw it when they were describing where it was located between Canada and Mexico. And I just kind of like went back into the paragraph. And as my mouse like went backwards over the word, I saw it.
Yeah. If you're really geography savvy, then yeah, there's some hints in there. Yeah.
I got it when they were talking about like the leader and the name was spelled out super funny, and I was like, oh, that looks weird. So I like read it backwards and it said Washington, and I was like, oh, so I bet Nasarima has something to do with America, right?
Yeah, and that's a really, I mean, they're definitely, this is written by an anthropologist, or at least, well, it is written by an anthropologist, but you can see the historical knowledge, anthropological knowledge in there. Other societies, it's very common historically for societies to take their founders and elevate them to godlike status, right? And it touches on that. There's a thought that some of the ancient European gods, Odin in particular, may have been a war chief. There's some thoughts in that regard. And it's interesting because in our society, we have elevated George Washington to be this larger than life character in a lot of ways. Yeah, neat. Let me look at my questions there because, oh, one sec. My PowerPoint's getting away from me. What is the author? So what is the author? We talked a little, maybe we haven't. What is the author saying about American society in this piece? And is it a valid criticism? Or is it overly exaggerated?
Americans spend too much time caring about outer, like beautification, fashion.
Yeah, this appearance thing, and we'll go to these extreme measures to do that. Yeah, sure. Anything else we missed there?
To me, it felt kind of like, I guess you could call it like a break in the fourth wall. It felt like it was saying something about the reader itself, in the way that we were so shocked by like what we were reading. Like I remember I was so shocked. I was like, this is happening. And it was only in like 1936 that this study was done. And it's the way that we all probably reacted if we didn't know that it expresses like some cultural bias where we were like, that's weird, but we do it and we didn't realize it.
Yeah. that's definitely a layer to this. One of the things that makes this piece something that we keep using is kind of the layered intricacy of it. Right now, I'd say we're on about layer 2. We're going to get down to 3 and 4 in a second. Anything else there? Definitely, these are issues in our society, issues with appearance and presentation and men and women and different expectations of men and women. This is definitely something as a society that is not a new thing. Yeah, totally. What is it saying then? This is the next layer down. What is it saying about anthropology or the social sciences? What critiques are there in this piece? There's definitely criticisms of social science in this piece. At least that's what I picked up this time. Anything you're seeing there?
I feel like in a way it puts a perspective on it it can put a perspective on a civilization or a people that isn't necessarily as it seems.
Yeah, it's not fair, right? Or it might be okay, you got something there, criticism, right? It's like, okay, I see your point there, but it is definitely, I feel, making a point of overly exaggerating the American hygiene ritual, right? To a point where we're a lot more than that, right? We're a lot more than how we go to the bathroom, right? But it's exaggerating and elevating to the point where you miss so much there. And I think that's a super valid criticism, not just of anthropology, but of all social sciences, saying, okay, we have these accounts, but we need to remember that there are people that don't do this in this society. There are 95% of the day that those people aren't extra interested in hygiene. And you can also look in as like, well, what are the things that actually they're doing there, right? We are all much healthier people because we brush our teeth every day, right? And because we bathe every day, maybe in quarantine every couple of days, right? Like we do these things for a reason, right? And I think that's at least a criticism I read into that it's also kind of a more subtle critique at the social sciences. I'm wondering, and I honestly, this was in, one second. This was in Dr. Kern. I'm sorry, I couldn't remember my colleague's last name because I only ever call her by her first name. This was in Dr. Kern's syllabus, and I said to her, are we still using body ritual of the Nasarema? Because like I haven't taught something like anthropology in a long time. It's just not something that usually has it. So we had a conversation about it, and she said, yeah, we still are, and like we still, there's still stuff you can use in it, I guess. But it looks like you did get something out of it. Now, my criticism, though, of it is the piece out of date? Like, is this still useful as a piece?
I think it's actually a little more in date. I think it's becoming more and more useful. I think it's criticizing more because I think our society is more focused on like beauty and materialism than it used to be, actually.
You think?
I kind of agree with that too.
You think? Maybe. I don't know. I think that is that. It could be. I don't know. I think our society, I think that's something that we've had for a very, very long time, being very obsessed with appearance. I really think it has. But that's an interesting point. Okay. Anything else? In some of your papers, I saw and I haven't graded anything yet. I just took a glance. I saw that some of you were talking about this society that existed, or this society in the past, right? I haven't really seen that all that much because, like I said, I haven't used this piece for a couple years now. It's been at least 10 years. I think it does touch on the way things used to be kind of criticism there too that we can talk about. That's interesting.
I think in mine, I really mentioned how they kind of went through all that pain and suffering because they thought that's what was necessary. And I think that can kind of go along with what we do as a society too. We go through a lot of, we think, oh, we have to do this in order to either fit in or to be like accepted, I guess, in a way. I think
yeah. And it definitely talks to layers of things that maybe resonate to some of you who are younger, because like definitely adolescence and post-adolescence, and at least until you reach your dadness, if you will, whether you're a parent or not, you enter a certain level where I'm wearing black socks with sandals right now, and I feel that's my right as a father. So like one of those appearance things. Yeah, totally. Interesting. Okay. Anything else on this piece people want to say?
I was thinking that we choose our own social rituals to abide by or not to abide by. And, I think that we have items that we love, just for specific reasons, that we endow with, emotional properties. And like you were saying, it goes back in history. Perhaps a mother in the days of the prairie might give a corncob doll to a young child, which was endowed with, some kind of family trait. Mm-hmm. And I think we still do that, with Christmas to the extreme. So I think that when I read the piece, I was like, are they really talking about a foreign culture? Is this person trying to persuade, people to think, hey, we're superior, but knowing it's a punk, that's a total twist to me.
Yeah. It's an interesting piece. Yeah. Honestly, to me, it's using it is like a touch of a throwback to a previous generation of teaching, right? This definitely has the flavor, to me, of 1990s social science kind of style. Yeah, it's really interesting. I had kind of a unique experience with it, just like saying, it's not necessarily the way I would do it, but I'm glad you got something out of it. And yeah, it's good. And honestly, the writing style is a smidge obtuse, but you do kind of see that kind of hyper verbiage in academic journal articles if you want to go into academia or advanced studies like that. But it wasn't too painful. Anyway, though, I was also kind of shocked. I was just like poking around on the piece that there were only 3 citations on it. If you look at most journal article pieces, there's at least like 20 references in there. And I started to think about the arms race that is academic reference pages, but that's beside it. Okay, I'm going to shift things around a little bit. Okay, put you over there. Going to go back into full-blown lecture mode. I think we addressed each of these things. And we see in Body Ritual of the Nasarema, we see kind of an outsider perspective on our culture. What in sociology we call the sociological perspective. Our ability to see and analyze different societies and different cultures and dissect it, and then turning it in on our own society and being able to do that. That's one of the reasons why if you've taken a social course, then that definitely is a reason why this could have been used. So let's go back to this course in particular and talk about in terms of biology and in terms of society. And I'm just quadruple checking. You do actually see my PowerPoint presentation right now, right? Good. Those lingering fears of the Zoom brain. If you've taken other social scientific courses, you might be familiar with some of these terms, but I am going to be using them for the first time tonight. And if you aren't familiar with them, you should know about it. Social scientists often examine the world in terms of multiple levels or levels of analysis. We have the micro level, which is the small personal level. And in that level, we look at interpersonal relationships. We could look at families. We could look at small organizations. So small groups. And small groups are super interesting in terms of social psychology and also sociology, because the dynamic of your relationship, that you have a relationship with one person, is very different than if you have a relationship with two people in a group of 3, and then a group of 4 is very different, a group of 5 is very different. Each of those numbers of friend groups or sibling groups or whatever are very, very different. You can think about the traditional 2-person romantic couple, and then think about how different that is to the not necessarily new, but more modernly accepted 3-person romantic couple, right? Those are 2 very different social groups, even if they're doing roughly the same thing. The meso level of analysis is the medium level of society, right? Meso level, and you'll find meso level spelled M-E-Z-Z-O, you'll see it spelled M-E-Z-O, you'll see it spelled M-E-S-O. There honestly isn't a agreed upon spelling of that word, which is kind of aggravating. But at the meso level, the medium level, we look at cities. We could look at interstate commerce. So how like a small state like New Hampshire interacts with Connecticut or something like that. You could look at regional rivalries. You could look at the economic interactions between the Ohio State University and Michigan, and how that money transfer and people transfer during non-COVID times, what that really looks like, and what that social relationship of that rivalry looks like. That's something you could study on the meso level. And then the macro level is the big picture, right? It's the big structural picture. You're looking at nations, you're looking at multinational corporations, you could be looking at government organizations. So you could look at how the IRS interacts with the ATF, or how the IRS interacts with states. You could look at international organizations. So you could look at treaties, how treaties are interacted with between nations, and then what part multinational corporations play into play. Super big picture. Most typically, social scientists either look at the micro level or the macro level. That's what we look at most often. But that meso level is actually a thing. The reason we don't necessarily look at the meso level as much is it tends to be a little grayer, and there's a little less specific theory applied there. But it is absolutely a thing. If you need help remembering, microscope, same Latin root word, macro, not micro, I guess. Macro is the big one. And in any field, honestly, that talks about people, that talks about social structures, you're going to run into these terms, actually. My wife, I may have mentioned, is a social worker. And between social workers, they talk about, are you a micro person or a macro person? A macro person tends to be more of an administrative, social interact, like building of groups person. A micro level social worker tends to be someone that works with individual people trying to make their lives better. That's where that kind of comes from. And just a reminder, if you should take notes in a way that makes sense for you, absolutely. These slides are available on Blackboard, and I do encourage you to take notes no matter what. Nature versus nurture. This is a super common conversation discussed in the social sciences. This is one of those things that I think is just primo college content that we're able to get at in college that maybe necessarily you didn't have the full ability to process as a high schooler. And it's a philosophical question, right? But it not only is philosophical, we have scientific data to go with it. Is human behavior guided by our biology, our nature? Or is our experience in the social world what actually guides our behavior, the nurture of it, right? And those terms, nature versus nurture, those go back to Renaissance era philosophical conversations. People like John Locke, for example, tabula rasa. However you want to say it. That is very much a nature and nurture conversation, but that's beside the point. Psychologists tend to look more into biology and look more into nature, right? So they look at things like brain waves, brain chemistry, how the brain changes after trauma, maybe how your heredity impacts your behavior. Something like schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is one of a handful of psychological conditions that is very clearly and obviously linked to genetics. It was one of the very first psychological behavioral disorders that we were actually able to tie into the human genome and identify specific markers from one parent to the next in a really very interesting way. That is clearly a nature situation having to deal with that disorder. Anthropologists include both biological and social ideas. And don't get me wrong about psychologists. They definitely look at human social interaction as well, but not as much as anthropologists, and certainly not as much as sociologists tend to. Anthropologists, in terms of nature and nurture, are kind of in between sociologists and psychologists. Anthropologists look at biological data. They also look at social ideas. And they definitely, when you look at evolutionary biology, that is very much the realm, at least in terms of humans and hominids, that's the realm of anthropologists. Physical anthropologists look more at biological ideas. So physical anthropologists look at the stuff that was left over by previous humans or previous human-like ancestors. So they look at human evolution, they look at bones, they look at teeth, all that sort of stuff. Cultural anthropologists then look more at societies, and they typically look at currently existing societies where they can send people and like interview people and gather data and all that sort of thing. In the fiction that was created in the body ritual of the Nasarema, that was written in a way that the person went to observe that culture. That would have been the work of a cultural anthropologist. Sociologists then, we tend more to focus on social aspects of society. We don't really do that forensics, biological kind of stuff. Typically, we more typically look at human social interaction, how your behavior and personality is shaped by your social experiences. it's kind of a messy way to put it, but and this has changed in the modern era, but historically, anthropologists have studied societies that are not the one we are living in, right? They study other societies historically, while sociologists tend to study this society that we are living in. Now, and then like a German or a French or a Russian or a Chinese sociologist would be more inclined to study their own society, while anthropologists are more inclined to study other societies. That's not absolutely true all the time. There's a lot of gray area there, and there's certainly plenty of sociologists who have studied other societies, but that's just generally one area where the two disciplines vary. Ultimately, and I addressed this a touch, neither side it has all the answers, right? Some aspects of the human experience is nature. Some aspects of the human experience is nurture. It really isn't super helpful in the social sciences to think in those kind of bifurcated black and white terms, right? But yeah, we have both. And really it's kind of a false dichotomy between nature versus nurture. There's some stuff that definitely is biological. There's some stuff that is definitely socialized. So let's look at a biological idea. Look at the concept of biological adaptation. An adaptation is a change in the structure or life ways of an individual or population by which it becomes better fit to survive and reproduce in its environment, right? So typically when we talk about adaptations, we are talking about biology. There are things that could be called social adaptations, but we have different words for those in the social sciences. And there are finer definitions that you could call social adaptations, but we're not going to get into that right here. I won't ask you that on an exam, for example. Physical anthropologists tend to focus heavily on adaptation. So how have our bodies physically, biologically changed? We can see when we compare the body and physiologies of chimpanzees and bonobos to human bodies, the different lived experiences that we have to go through. If you don't know, bonobos and chimpanzees are actually very similar animals, but bonobos are their own species. Bonobos tend to be more community oriented as opposed to chimpanzees. They tend to be less aggressive, and they are actually two biologically distinct species. Chimpanzees are dramatically, and there's a social construct in our society that chimps are super cute. They're also intensely dangerous, right? Chimps are definitely much more dramatic and dangerous than us humans are. They have large canine teeth that they can use as weapons to attack with. They are dramatically, they have longer reach, and they are dramatically stronger than humans are. Additionally, chimps, and this isn't on this picture, male chimpanzees have much larger penises proportionately than humans do. And that is because their species, they don't mate for life the way humans do. They have to be much more sexually aggressive to pass on their genes, right? And so it's not just like a weird pervy thing. That's straight up real evolution. That's what that is. And their lives, you know, they're shaped differently from a biological standpoint because they live different lives than we live. And the hair thing isn't just a matter of we live inside anymore. That's not it either. Our species, our human species, the best evidence shows we came from somewhere in northern Africa. We didn't need to be hairy there because that was kind of the climate there. So yeah, anyway, moving on. Plasticity. Plasticity is another biological concept. It is our capacity of our brain to adapt, right? So this is more of an anthropological and psychological concept. Plastic, the stuff, right, that this pen's made out of, plastic is called plastic because when you warm it up, it's easy to shape. That's what that is. Plasticity is the ability of humans to change our behavior in response to a wide range of environmental ideas. Not all creatures have this capacity. The human brain, though, does have this capacity. Do some other animals have this capacity? Yeah, but we have it to a big degree. This is what enabled us to spread across the world and live in almost any climate, because we have the ability to figure out and change and do that sort of thing. And it's not just our ability to, well, this is a pretty good example, figure out how to catch fish in different environments. Here we have ice fishing where people punch down into the water. Here we have some South Pacific fishing with a big net. If you're not familiar with Southern Appalachian noodling, that's what this called. He caught this fish with his hands. That's what this is all about. And part of noodling is taking your fingers and making them look like worms, like going like this, and then reaching down into the fish's mouth and grabbing them that way. It's really a pretty wild thing, but that's something that people were able to figure out and think just wildly about and turn off part of their brain that made them not want to get bit by a big old fish, right? That's plasticity. And it's not just behavioral, it's tolerance to the environment, right? Depending on the environment that the individual human lives in, makes us more able to put up with cold, right? Or makes us more able to put up with heat. If you know somebody that grew up in a much different climate than you, they probably have very different ideas as to what is comfortable, what is not comfortable, where do you want to wear a t-shirt, where do you not want to wear a t-shirt. That's a matter of brain plasticity and what you learned as a little kid. I believe it's the Swedish, they have a practice of taking their little babies and bundling them up, but putting them outside in the cold for like an hour, like when they're little babies. And they do that to like get the kid acclimated to the cold. And they think it's very healthy for them. It's a very interesting concept. It hasn't been something my wife has allowed me to do, but it's an interesting idea. So, more about plasticity. All humans, and this is a really relatively interesting bit. All humans, all of us, we are actually biologically intensely similar to each other, right? Even more than other species of animal. We may look all different from each other, but that's just because how our brains have made divisions, because humans are good at seeing differences between things. Honestly, we are all very, very biologically similar. That's not just a matter of like, oh, feel good or whatever. We're very similar, regardless of our race or ethnicity. What makes us different, what makes us appear different, what makes us behave different is how we react to our environments. And the longer we're in an environment, the more specific our behavior, our adaptation, or what you could call social adaptation gets. We see this in how we dress. Here this is, and I got on the Alamy stock photo website because it gave me a bunch of the same kind of pictures. I wanted to be able to compare them. These are young men that grew up in the Australian outback. Their city is Aborigine. The Aborigines are actually the largest minority group in Australia. Here we have people, I believe this is probably South American people. They look Incan to me. What I wanted to point out here are their ponchos. If you don't know much about this garment, it looks a little bit like a blanket. The most common type of this type of poncho has actually been subsumed into like cannabis culture, if you will. Out west, this garment is sometimes called a drug rug because it's been up by hippie types. And I didn't really fully understand this garment until I went to New Mexico for the first time. It's their winter coat, right? Because the winter in cold, dry climates is different than winters in Ohio, right? We have wet, cold winters, right? Your traditional poncho or your more modern drug rug is not the winter coat you want because it will pick up the cold. If you go to, say, travel tip, I guess, if you ever go to Albuquerque, you're gonna want something like this because it'll hold in the heat, but it won't hold in moisture. It's a really very good garment for cold, dry coldness. And that's what they're wearing. I would assume by looking at this that we're probably below 50 degrees regardless of his sandals there. I would guess that we're looking at the scene under 50 degrees. Here we have a Laplander of traditional dress. In Europe, most people don't know so much about the nomadic societies of Europe. There are some. The Laplanders are a nomadic people that travel around in the Sweden, Norway, Finland, Scandinavian area. They're a good example of a nation of people without a state. We'll talk about that difference later on down the road. But their clothing is, it serves two purposes. This is a very different kind of clothing intended to keep the wet out, right? Because they have a wet, cold climate, unlike that of their South American counterparts. But also their clothing is very bright because, and all of these clothings are bright, but their clothing among the Laplanders is specifically bright because they are often in very flat, snow-covered areas, right? Where it's easy to get lost. But if you're wearing that super bright colored clothing, you're more likely to get spotted when people go out to try to find you, right? That's what that's all about. Here,
It's a nice class. I paid tuition for this. Great.
Time is money, right?
Great times. 2 weeks
it's
in a row.
technology. It's bound to happen. You know, Zoom is overloaded now because Everybody's doing it.
How you doing?
Hey, he's back.
I'm back.
Great.
I was
You come back. Oh, look.
Yeah. Okay, I am back. Hey, everybody. You don't see probably my screen. Let me put it back there and ta-da. Just give me a second to move everything around. Okay, neat. Was it just me then that cut out? That's good. I guess that's good. Okay, I was talking about pants. Pants are a very European, modern European emphasized thing. That Europeans did not invent pants, but the emphasis that only men can only wear pants, that is kind of a modern-esque European kind of thing. So really dominated in the era, say from about, actually no, little boys used to actually wear dresses in the beginning of the 1900s because, and I'll put it in this in strictly parenting terms, if you're a person that is shitting themselves relatively frequently, it's much harder to deal with pants on a child as opposed a dress, man. Dresses are perfect for changing diapers. They're really amazing little things. Yeah, moving on though. Oh, but also, this I just put in. I put in t-shirts, and I tried to pick the most generic t-shirt guy possible. T-shirts say something too about the environment that we live in, right? T-shirts are cheap, right? T-shirts are comfortable in most indoor environments, whether it's winter or summertime, right? And the combination of those things really says about who we are and the climates we're most likely to be in, right? If you know that you're not going to go outside your house in December and you can control all of the heat or cold in your house, right, you are kind of likely to wear a t-shirt in the middle of December, right? That's something that can happen. And if your house is properly insulated and you're not spending a whole lot of money on heating it, like that can be a solution that makes sense to you. I remember specifically when I was my dorm in college, I was living in the room that was structurally above the furnace room, the boiler room. My floor was literally warm to touch. We couldn't put chocolate on the floor because it would melt. It was wild. So I wasn't wasting heat. That wasn't a choice I could make, right? But I would wear t-shirts and sometimes shorts in the middle of December because that's what made sense to me, right? Yeah, so moving on. Anyway, society. So this is more of a social process I'm talking about. I know I'm showing animals, but I've moved on from talking from biological processes onto social processes. So social processes are ways in which we can adapt within one lifetime. This is a major, I put it is the major advantage humans have over other species, right? This is our superpower. This is our thing that we do. We are capable of figuring things out and changing the way we behave based on the situation in front of us. That is, and our extreme capacity to do that is what makes us, by most accounts, the dominant species in our planet, right? This is a major advantage, we can do in a couple minutes, actually, and certainly over a human lifetime, what it can take hundreds of generations for animals to do. But with that said, that's not to say that other societies not other societies, other species don't also have culture, because culture is learned behavior and learned ways and methods of doing things that aren't hardwired into your brain. So we know that birds like especially crows and other birds with relatively large brains, and we see the similar behavior among chimps. Some groups of chimps know how to dig into a hill to get ants out to eat. Some groups of crows know how to use sticks as tools, but not all of them do. That indicates culture. It doesn't have to do with evolutionary knowledge. It has to do with the fact that other chimps in the groups have taught them how to do it, right? Also found in zoos in a not natural setting that you can teach certain animals behavior. And it's more than just a trick, right? That's us passing a piece of culture from ourselves to that animal, right? And then they can pick it up and continue to do it. That indicates a capacity for culture in those animals. Octopi are incredibly interesting animals in this regard because scientists that study, they're very specific, what do they call them? Astrobiologists, something like that. If you were a scientist that wanted to try to study an alien brain, right? Well, what do we have access to that would be like a sentient, thinking alien? The closest thing it's thought you could get to that on our planet are octopi. They are capable of complex thinking situations. They are capable of culture. There are groups of octopi that teach each other how to use coconut shells as tools to cover themselves up with as protection. Some octopi of this species do that, others do not. It is a matter of them teaching each other how to do it, which is a remarkably interesting thing. But each of these examples, the chimp, the crow, and the octopus, they do it to a very minor degree. Us humans do it to an amazingly huge capacity that is our culture. Yeah. Inculturation is a specific type of culture use. So inculturation, sociologists often call this socialization or re-socialization. It's the process of learning to be a member of a cultural group. If you just started college, you're going through the process of being enculturated to be a college student. This is what orientation weeks are all about. Now, whether you're doing it virtually or in person, either of those efforts are all about that. It's not all about trying to advertise to get you to go do things. It's about showing you what is the stuff that they are doing. And these orientation weeks are also about encouraging you to wear your face masks and socially distance properly, because you guys are so important for maintaining the pandemic and preventing it and stopping it, because most of you are in a super healthy demographic that if you contract COVID, you can probably feel pretty good, right? And people who have stuff, are sick, but feel pretty good are super, super dangerous in terms of COVID and similar diseases, because you guys are the spreaders, right? So it's super important for society. If you wanted a moment in your life to make a difference, please keep wearing that mask. Please keep staying put, because we need you to not spread this thing. right? That's what makes those infamous spring breaks that happened earlier this year so nasty and so wicked, and what makes Florida such a hotbed right now. It's people who aren't actually getting sick, but have the disease in them, spreading it around. And that's why there's such this emphasis on our orientation weeks, because it is a health important thing. And we also see our capacity to change our culture, right? Because if this pandemic thing would have happened to a non-human animal, it has a capacity to potentially wipe it out, right? But we are capable of learning and changing our behavior, right? And that's really one of the strongest advantages we have as a species. There's a really interesting, if you're a sci-fi oriented person, there's an author called Harry Turtledove who's done a fair amount of historical fiction, but he's also done a little bit of sci-fi. And he explores that idea in his alien work, where there's an alien species that visits the Earth, and they try to invade, but they don't quite invade. And then they're forced to live with humans alongside the aliens. And the short of it is basically that the aliens aren't capable of learning and changing in ways that humans are. It's an interesting side note. Anyway, habitus. This is another concept and ways that society changes our behavior. And habitus isn't necessarily always good. It can be good, but not necessarily always. But really, all of these concepts can be both good and bad. So habitus is a more macro level phenomena. These are the taken for granted ways of acting that are acquired through both individual and social experience. That's habitus. The behavior of a group of people that you have learned, you have been enculturated into. An example of this is that people who have been through times of need have a tendency to save things, and they also are more prone to falling into hoarder behavior. This behavior was very, very typical among people who lived through the Great Depression. So the older generation that's largely died off now, the parents of the boomers, a lot of those people had a distinct tendency to hoard and save things and not throw out anything, really. And that's because that behavior was critical for those people to survive that era, right? I hypothesize, I have a suspicion that in 20, maybe 30 years by now, our behavior of us, me and you, and us people who are adults now during this time, this COVID time, we are going to be similarly more prone maybe to those types of hoarding type behaviors, and there'll probably be a heightened degree of germophobia among our generation compared to future generations. That's the type of habitus, because now, during this era that we're in, there are behaviors that definitely advantage us, right? We see similar kinds of those tendencies toward hoarding among refugees, among people who grew up in poverty specifically, right? Because those behaviors collectively do serve a purpose at a point. That all makes sense. Any questions at this point? Okay, cool.
Does the habitus, does it include norms and values?
Yeah, so have I talked about norms or values yet? Did I talk about that last class? Yeah, okay.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I talk about norms and values so much in all of my classes that's hard to keep track of when it is. I would say, in the scope of it, that Norms and values are the little pieces, and habitus is the bigger behavior, right? So if you think of it in terms of Legos, right? If you would make a house out of Legos, the house would be the habitus, and then the Legos would be the norms and values, I guess, the little smaller pieces. Good question. Good question. Innovation. Innovation is a way that we adapt with society. Innovation is a new object, a new way of thinking, or a new way of behaving that is different from previous existing forms, qualitatively different. It's actually for real different, right? We see this in knives, actually, that different societies use. This is a fishing knife. This is a buck knife. The fishing knife is specifically thin and has a little bit of a curve to it to clean fish. But I assume that, I don't know because I'm not really a boat person, even though part of me wants to be, that they probably chop other things on a boat too, right? Other than just the fish. They use that knife for all kinds of stuff, but the main purpose for it is for gutting and cleaning fish. This is a buck knife. If you grew up in Western Pennsylvania or, oh, actually, I have one right here, actually. It's just, this is my pocket knife. It actually looks like it is a massive big knife, but it fits my big hand. And I grew up in Western Pennsylvania. It is not uncommon in Western Pennsylvania to carry a big honking knife with you. Now, that is a cultural difference between rural people and urban people, right? In an urban environment, they would assume, well, why do you have that knife? Are you going to stab somebody, right? That's the cultural, I guess, use of that when there's nothing but people around you. In a rural area, especially if you were a hunter, you use, it's called a buck knife because you gut bucks with them. You cut up the sternum and you take the guts out of the deer. You have to do that when you kill a deer, otherwise the meat will spoil. It'll spoil pretty quickly. You have to get that stuff out of there so that your meat stays preserved and stays good. And then my wife once asked me when I was explaining this to her, well, what happens to guts? Well, you just leave it in a pile in the middle of the field and nature takes care of the rest. That's the grossness of where I grew up. But is that element. Now, this is a way I've kind of changed in COVID. I'm carrying a bucket now because I'm fixing things around my house, and that's just kind of how I think to fix things, is to chop it or to like poke it, right? That's what I use it for. This piece, the Leatherman, is, and I actually just bought one of these for my daughter. The Leatherman strikes me as the innovation of either the buck knife or the fishing knife for a more urban environment, right? For people who aren't out in the countryside, who have maybe more specialized things to have to deal with. So you need needle nose pliers. You might need a little bit of knife, a saw. There are screwdrivers on there. There are all kinds of little things that you need to do to tinker and deal with things in an environment that isn't purely that of a natural landscape, right? While these knives are more rough, less refined, but more capable, wider scope of issues. I should have wrote it down, but I don't remember what this knife is specifically called. This is a knife that is a domestic knife used specifically by Inuit tribes and other American Indian tribes in the north, in Alaska and northern Canada. This is for chopping meat. with kind of a rocking fashion, and it is especially good for cutting mammal meat, so whale meat or seal meat. It's specifically used for, but also it's used in the kitchen and that sort of thing. You could see how this kind of knife would be just a smidge safer when you have kids running around in a domestic way, as opposed to these bigger, straighter, pointy knives, right? It's just a smidge safer. One of the translations of the name of this knife, and this definitely reflects patriarchy. This is the translation of the knife is the woman's knife, because in those societies, women were more domestic. But it definitely is still a heck of a knife. Yeah, that all makes sense there? Yeah, and I wasn't expecting to have my pocket knife here, but I just take the things out of my pockets when I sit down, and that's what it is. So, symbols are also a very important element of our culture that help us to adapt and help us to communicate with each other. Symbols are defined from culture to culture and are determined by the meaning that groups give to them. This is a big difference. It's a big concept in the social sciences, right? And especially in sociology, but also in anthropology. Honestly, symbols are kind of, and the way that different societies use the same symbol are kind of a low-grade obsession of mine. I find them very interesting. The reason why symbols are so interesting to me is that everything is a symbol. Everything, absolutely everything is a symbol for something, right? Especially things that don't have inherent value, right? So there's water in this mug. Water has inherent value. So you drink it, right? And we all humans drink water in one way or another. But this pen, on the other hand, I have to learn how, this is just the day I pick up everything and use. The pen I make symbols with this pen, right? I write the symbols of language. It signifies, the red pen signifies grading. Having something written in red on a piece of paper means something different than having something written in black. Honestly, it's a symbol of being a little bit obsolete, because I'm not doing any grading in red this semester because everything is online. A bed is not only of intrinsic value, is a symbol of sleep, of rest. It could be a symbol of sexual activity. These are other symbols, very different, that each of these things have. Books can signify knowledge. They can be a collection of letters, as in not only just letters that people write, but like to other people, but also just collections of actual letters. It could be a story. A car can be a symbolize of a way to escape, of independence. It could be a symbol of you being fettered down and having to go to work. It is a symbol of fertility. It's a symbol of recreation. It's a symbol of food. Everything in our society that we interact with is a symbol, and probably multiple layers of symbols. That's a super interesting concept in terms of social sciences. And of course, it's going on for multiple slides. So a sign is a specific type of symbol. A sign is a symbol that conveys more specific, complex, or abstract concepts. But these are all important to the time and place of the society, right? The stop sign is a very specific thing, right? You see a stop sign, you are in a car, it is telling you a legally mandated way that you have to stop your car. It's also telling you a very specific way to stop your car, right? You stop there for a second, and then you keep on going, right? You don't park your car at a stop sign. you can actually kind of coast through a little bit depending on what part of the country you're in, right? Or what the surroundings are around you, but it's telling you an intensely specific thing. The McDonald's arches are a symbol. They convey a specific type of food and types of food you can get. It conveys to you, the Big Mac itself is a symbol, right? You can think right now and get a little bit hungry. I ate dinner before this, but you can taste a Big Mac almost, can't you? That's a symbol. That's a very hardwired symbol into our brains. And that's what the McDonald's Golden Arches M signifies. That is specific, it's global now, but say 1920, you wouldn't have recognized that as being anything. You might recognize it as being an M. Religious symbols, signs, these are all signs. Religious signs are very interesting. We can see between two signs of Christianity and confer different things, right? It's generally accepted. The image of Jesus on the cross is more of a Catholic signified sign than a Protestant or a non-denominational Christian sign. It's definitely more of that. And we see traditional white Jesus on the cross with long hair and a beard, right? If you would see any variation there, if you would see a browner Jesus or a black Jesus there, then that would definitely signify something different than this quote unquote traditional white Jesus there. The just plain black cross also signifies something different. Where I grew up in a town that was very much, there were Catholics, there were Protestants, and you knew who you were, right? And this was the cross of the Protestants, this was the cross of the Catholics, and that's just, that was whose cross belonged to who, right? If you didn't grow up in a place with a whole lot of Christianity, these might, it's like the same damn thing to you, right? Like that's the difference in cultures that signs can convey. And this conveys like religiosity specifically a whole lot, right? There is a lot of knowledge, a lot of feelings, a lived experience that are conveyed in these signs that are different from society to society, from individual experience to individual experience. That's all super interesting stuff. Anyway, moving on. Gestures are another type of symbol. Here we have obscene gestures from around the world, right? Gestures are body movements or positioning that conveys language. I'm actually, and anytime you give this lecture, and I'm sure you're doing the same thing, becoming very aware of my body language because I'm talking about it now. But I probably would be making these gestures even if my camera weren't going, right? Because they are hardwired into us. This is how we move and how we behave. Different societies, though it should be pointed out, use different gestures. All of these symbols are effectively the finger. They're all the same symbol. Some of them, and they're all, if you know what they mean, relatively obscene. A lot of them have to do with sexuality that are going on there too. I don't quite know the Greece one, but there is definitely a lot of genitalia and sex acts involved in these various hand motions. It's also interesting to note that the AOK symbol was co-opted by the far right in this country, and this is actually now can be is a symbol of, I can't remember exactly what it means, but this isn't, don't use this AOK anymore. It's Nazi bullshit and fuck Nazis every day. Anyway, this is why emails and texts can be tricky for conveying ideas. right? Because when you're trying to send a message to someone and just tell them, okay, well, if you just put K period, that there's no, it can strike one person as passive aggressive. It can strike another person as, oh, that's okay, it's no big deal, right? My brother specifically, his quick response is just the letter K, that's it. And in my head, I read that as, well, what's your problem, right? Like are you being passive aggressive to me? I don't really know, right? My advisor in grad school had a really habit of just putting ellipses, of just finishing things with ... Well, what are you saying, dude? Are you saying, what are you like? And the gestures and tonality of our voices and all of that, those are all super important to human communication. And it's an issue we have in our modern, so I can tell a whole lot from seeing your faces. I can tell that you understand, you're generally paying attention. I can tell all these things. That's why this stuff is important. Tone of voice also contributes. I don't think I have a specific slide based on tonality, but different societies have different tonalities built into their language. The English language, European languages, often tone is associated with emotion, sometimes in telling whether something's a question, right? Something like that, right? In how we raise or lower our voices. Some Asian languages, some African languages, tonality of a word can change the definition of the word, right? And this is a clumsy example, but in, say, Mandarin Chinese, a word can mean either idiot or mother based on its actual tone. That's not a great example there, but that's not a perfect example, but that's what it means. Whether I say it like this or whether I say it like this, it makes a difference. It makes a big difference, not just in what I'm telling you, but like the specific word, which is a major hurdle for native English speakers learning to speak languages like Chinese. I think there's some of that in Japanese and Asian languages specifically as well. So this is kind of a mind blower. Language is just a set of symbols, right? That's all it is, right? Without our social construction and agreements that the word this means this, that the word you means you, the word me means me, that my name is Jeremy and your name is something else, right? That we are different people, that it's just symbols. It's just a big pile of symbols. It's all just symbols. And if you think too hard about that, you're going to make your brain explode, because how do we even communicate with other people, man? Like that real kind of campfire stoner thoughts. That's what language is, right? It's an incredibly complex series of symbols, and we're going to tie this in with a concept known as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis later in this course that like really is mind-bendingly wild. Language is critical to we experience our universe as humans. It's how we're wired. We're wired for language. It's super important. I wish I could speak other languages more fluently. I don't have that capacity. I would love to speak another or at least a couple other languages. I'd love to really get in on some German. Okay. Any questions to this point? About to go on to another set of concepts? Yeah? Let me look at the time. Gotta take a drink of water. I have a whole bunch of lecture up behind this. Okay. So, let's talk about ethnocentrism and cultural relativism. These are concepts that we are going to be directly engaging in our conversation around the film next week. Ethnocentrism is the condition of considering your own society's tastes, culture, or understandings as being superior to those of other societies, right? So ethnocentrism is thinking that your society's ways, that your people's ways, that your town's ways even of doing that thing is innately superior to other ways, right? One of the more ugly versions of ethnocentrism is ideologies like white supremacy, right? That is an ideology of ethnocentrism. All of us have ethnocentrism. All of us have these kind of preferences that we've been taught, right? And one of the points of taking a course in INST or any other department is to help you get around your ethnocentrism. Now, often when talking about ethnocentrism in the past, I've talked about non-European foodways. I've decided to mix it up a little bit and show that traditional European foodways can be super gross too, but also delicious. Here we have a can of sardines, right? If you're not really familiar with traditional, sardines used to be super common in the United States. It used to be that guys would, probably your grandfathers or great-grandfathers would pack their lunch with a can of sardines in there with, I don't think it's cooked in oil, and then just pop those little pieces of fish in their mouth, right? The same people that definitely would have thought sushi was weird, right? They were eating fish, who knows how old fish out of cans, right? Here we have what they're preparing, I believe this is lamb head, two of them for preparation in Rome. Italian food isn't just spaghetti. It's about all kinds of foods, and eating the whole head of the lamb it's kind of a group meal there. Does anyone know what this is? What they're looking at here? Anyone know that? This weird loaf? It's a Pennsylvania Dutch food called scrapple. Scrapple is basically all the parts of usually the head of the pig that you boil the head. You can take it from other parts of the pig too. It's basically the junk pieces. And then they mix it in a little bit of flour, or it could be buckwheat you can use too. And then you slice that up and you brown it. And it's pretty great. But I'm sure all of these foods are pretty great. I'm sure there are some amazingly good sardines out there. I'm allergic to fish, so I'm not going to explore that. But all of these things also, by our modern sensibilities, are gross, right? They're yuck, they're gross, right? But that's an ethnocentric judgment, right? Each of these is somebody's absolute favorite food. Eurocentrism is a specific type of ethnocentrism. Eurocentrism is giving European cultures preference in determining what is favorable, what is good, or what is normal, right? This is the most common version of ethnocentrism you are likely to encounter living in the United States. It's also most common in Europe, other parts of North America, South Africa, Australia, those places that were heavily colonized by Europeans. Those are the places where you're most likely to find Eurocentrism. There is Eurocentrism in other non-European dominated parts of the world, but that's where it's most common. Really are as American as apple pie is. Apple pie is a basic variation on German or Swiss strudel. I don't know if that's actually even a great example of that. I think I just wanted to talk about apple pie and strudel. I'm not sure if there's a great example for this slide. This actually looks like a piece of apple pie, but this is specifically technically a strudel. because it has oat bits in there. I think I just need to make a pie. I don't even know why these slides are here. I think I'm just hungry. Anyway, though, in general, around the world, racism does tend to skew white. You are far more likely to find pro-white racism around the world, even in places that aren't white dominated. Well, they were white dominated is the thing. There might not be a majority of white people, specifically in India. There are other places, but in India, there is definitely a preference, a social inferiority / superiority complex toward people with lighter colored skin. That was absolutely aggravated by the fact that the British colonized India for 150 years, and they took advantage of the caste system as it existed, and they encouraged it to be effectively more racist, right? And that is that's an example of Eurocentrism. So this second example is great. I don't know why I put the apple pie stuff here. Anyway, another example of Eurocentrism is what are societies to be considered to be sophisticated forms of music, right? You think of something like opera or ballet or a big symphony orchestra as being really super sophisticated, right? Well, that's because those are European dominated music forms, at least traditionally, right? They do orchestras in Beijing, and they do ballet in Tokyo, right? But that's not where those music forms originated. Here we have a African, I don't know the specific culture, I really should have looked that up, dance that is, I am sure by looking at and what I saw, just as sophisticated as the orchestra. But what makes us think that these guys with wooden drums and sticks, not wearing shoes, in a field is less sophisticated than this thing, right? That is a matter of Eurocentrism, right? And honestly, the fact that I didn't document this specific tribe and this specific group of people that did this, find out what this music form is called, that is also an inadvertent act of Eurocentrism on my part, putting that in there. Now, Afrocentrism then is not to be confused with ethnocentrism or Eurocentrism. Afrocentrism is a different thing, and I only put it in here because sometimes it comes up in conversation. Afrocentrism is a political and educational philosophy that gives emphasis to African cultures and or history, right? It's not the same thing. There's an Afrocentric school in the near South Side in Columbus. It just also teaches about that stuff, and Afrocentric schools, they may even also, they teach the European stuff too, but they also teach the African history, the African music, and that sort of thing too. So in terms of ethnocentrism, being biased toward African cultures in a way that would compare to Eurocentrism is exceedingly rare. It is, are there people you could call Afrocentric that are really super biased toward Africa as opposed to Europe? I mean, probably hypothetically, but it's so unbelievably rare. And then you could have a further conversation then, though. Can it even come close to being as severe because we do live in a white-dominated society, right? And the power of the person who is Eurocentric is so much greater than the power of the person who is Afrocentric, right? They're really not comparable things. The short of what I'm saying is Eurocentrism is a major problem in society, and Afrocentrism is a philosophical idea. It's not even that thing. It really shows the difference in power dynamics between groups in our society, and that's something that we do need to change. Cultural relative, and how do we change that stuff? This is how we change this stuff. Let me take a drink. So cultural relativism it's effectively the opposite of ethnocentrism. It's judging other societies, other cultures on their own terms relative to, in their own relative terms, as opposed to judging them in their own society's terms. Opposite of ethnocentrism. So if you eat the scrapple, you taste the scrapple, you understand what it has to do with that culture, and it's a breakfast food, by the way, right? And you put it outside of your mind that those little chunks of blood and meat and bone and fat on the pig head, and that's what it's made of, and that stuff is gross. You appreciate it for what it is. That's cultural relativism. Now, multiculturalism, then, this is a similar concept. It's not exactly the same thing. Multiculturalism is an educational and organizational philosophy that emphasizes the importance of all cultures, right? This can be specific due to the needs of the organization. It can also be more general. At most colleges, you will there's a multicultural department, multicultural center. So there's some department. I don't know specifically at Otterbein. I know it's there somewhere though, and I know I've interacted with them, that tends to emphasize multiculturalism, right? Now, at a place like Otterbein, where the dominant group, the dominant society, pretty darn white, right? Not super diverse, a little diverse, not super diverse. Their multicultural center will tend to be just kind of general multicultural, right? Basically serving the purposes of showing white people what not white people are doing, right? Basically that concept. In a place that has specific needs. So like in New Mexico, where the dominant culture is still white, but the predominant minority group is overwhelmingly either Latinx or Native American, those multicultural centers will focus on the specific super large minority groups. Does that make sense? It's just a difference that you can see and observe from one culture to another. And there's certainly, we've come a very long way in the last couple of decades in terms of doing multiculturalism better in some ways than in other ways. There certainly are more clumsy ways you can do it. Yeah, cool. Okay, what time is it? I'm gonna take a 5-minute break, and I encourage you to do the same. Let's come back and be in our seats again at 7:43. Okay, so I'll see you in a second. Okay, let's get rolling again. So this week's culture of the week is North Korea. North Korea is an amazingly interesting culture. This is one of the major reasons why I use the documentary I'm going to be using next week in our sociology movie night that is going to be a reminder on Tuesday, not on Monday. And if you look at North Korea, if you study North Korea, you can really see all of the ways that society that we are similar, but also ways that we can be very, very different too. It's an amazing comparison to compare the United States and North Korea to really see the sameness and the difference in societies. Need to get back on here. Okay. So, oh wait, that's not right. One second. One second, having a malfunction. There we go. Okay. So, the official name of North Korea is the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, also known as the DPRK. North Korea is situated on a global scale. Here's Australia. I honestly, and it's not your fault if your geography knowledge isn't very good. It's our school system and our society's fault. Here is Australia, and then we are up here in this zone. Here is Japan. Here is South Korea. Here is North Korea. Here is China. And a lot of people don't recognize how close that North Korea actually shares a border with Russia there too. That's historically very significant. The total population of the DPRK is 25.4 million. To put that into perspective, the population of South Korea is 51 million people. That is for a number of reasons. North Korea is dramatically more mountainous than South Korea is. So there are fewer places that are really good for large populations to develop. Similarly, though, definitely the reproduction rate in South Korea is lower than it is in North Korea because South Korea is a more pleasant place to live. The government type of North Korea is a totalitarian dictatorship. Totalitarianism is a modern form of government. There in past societies have not been the capacity for totalitarianism. In a totalitarian dictatorship, the government attempts not only to control the behavior of individuals, but the thinking of the population. In order to be able to do that, you need cameras, you need information infrastructures, you need reporting structures, right, where the government is trying to control people's behaviors, right? That wasn't possible, for example, in ancient Rome, right? The only thing, as much as the Romans were capable of controlling people in the far outskirts of their empire, the only thing they could actually control is that they pay their taxes or not, right? That's all the Roman Empire actually was. In North Korea, in Nazi Germany, in many other places that are totalitarian dictatorships, there is a capacity to try to control, if not what people think, at least their behavior, right? And this is one of the major dangers of technology, right? Is that as our communication infrastructures become more advanced and we can do things like a Zoom class, this also has the capacity of being monitored by a totalitarian government toward the end of controlling us, right? So if we lived in, and you know, there are criticism, oh, the United States isn't a democracy anymore, but and that sort of thing, make a very valid argument along those lines, but we are not living in a totalitarian dictatorship because I can say whatever I want to right now without fear that a drone's gonna swoop down out of the sky and bomb my house, right? Because of what I'm saying on this call right now. That's the big difference, but that's also the capacity though, right? Because if the United States were to become a totalitarian dictatorship, that could be, you can see that as being very real, right? Because this, I mean, this could get tapped into. Anyway, not only are they a totalitarian dictatorship, they are communist, right?
Did it happen again?
I love it here.
No, it's fine.
He died again, GG boys.
Oh.
He'll be back.
I was
I've had
really-
trouble
I was
all day with the
interested.
Zoom.
He got kicked out again.
It's fine.
Our professor froze again and left.
Showed up at all.
Second time.
Not to worry.
I think part of it is also internet.
Yeah,
I think the internet's been overloaded.
Yeah. My roommate like can't get online for like the past week, and here it sucks. And it's pretty choppy for me as well.
Well, my brother just takes all the Wi-Fi with his Xbox, so I always think it's me.
Gotta get that COD update.
Right. He's getting the new Avengers game tomorrow. He just told us all. He's like, I have to go to bed. I have to get up early to go to Best Buy.
It's a big day tomorrow. All right, so this is fun. I enjoy learning.
So what about that North Korea, huh?
Dude, what about that North Korea though?
Has anyone seen The Interview?
Yes.
Great movie.
That's exactly what that would look like, right? Like, I mean,
Oh my god.
oh my God, they got me. Okay. Anyway, I mean, maybe that was the NSA giving me a, hey, we're looking at you, buddy. Anyway, though. So, communism. I love those sentences. Communism is an ideology that advocates for tightly restricting businesses and redistributing wealth within society. Effectively, this makes the government responsible for the majority of economic production. And traditionally, communist societies have outlawed private businesses. What exactly are the various forms of socialism versus capitalism and all that stuff? We'll talk about that in much greater detail later on in the course. But the point I was making when I got cut out was that totalitarian dictatorships can take a variety of forms. Nazi Germany was a fascist totalitarian dictatorship, right? North Korea is a communist totalitarian dictatorship. The Soviet Union was a communist. Oh, you can't see the slides. Thank you. I need to share that. There we are. Good job bringing that up. Now I have to shift things around a lot more. Okay, so different, there are many different types of totalitarian dictatorship. It's basically a matter of tactics and strategy of how to dominate your people. It doesn't have to do with ideology specifically. The religion of North Korea is technically legally atheist, right? And it's very much more of a philosophy than an actual religion itself. There isn't a great translation for that thing, but the thing that people in North Korea believe and what the government encourages them to believe is called the Jewish ideal. The Jewish ideal, and I think I'm saying that wrong, is an atheist philosophy that emphasizes collectivism and self-sufficiency. It originated with Kim Il-sung. Kim Il-sung was the first great leader of North Korea. He was and continues to be the president of North Korea. Shows a major difference between our cultures. So the first leader in North Korea, their first president, is when he died, he was declared eternal president of North Korea, right? The concept of an eternal president is not something, it's a big difference between between United States society and North Korean society. The Jewish ideal is ethnic ultranationalism, right? So they do emphasize the ability of the Korean people to be super self-sufficient and be super collectivist. So it does emphasize the capacity of Korean and North Korean people specifically to do that. That makes them different than other Marxist-Leninist ideologies. If you know anything about traditional Marxist ideologies, they tend to emphasize that all workers are the same and all workers can pull together no matter who they are, regardless of race or ethnicity. Jewish ideology emphasizes, though, that Korean people are better and different in that way. That's a major distinction between North Korea and, say, for example, China or socialists or communists in other places. The Jewish ideal has been used to reinforce the cult of personality of the leadership of the Kim family. If you don't necessarily know, Kim is the last name of that dynasty, right? The first leader, the eternal president of North Korea, Kim Il-sung. Second leader, Kim Jong-il. Current leader of North Korea is Kim Jong-un, the grandson of Kim Jong-il. And the Jewish ideal has been used, and there are stories and ideology within it that have emphasized not just the superiority of the Korean people, but the superiority of the Kim family as being superior. It should also be pointed out in North Korea that Kim is a intensely common family name in not just North Korea, but South. Just a very, very common name. About half of the total population's last name or family name is Kim. So just because you know someone from Korea or even North Korea with the name Kim, it doesn't mean anything. That doesn't really tell you who they are, because there are millions of Kims. And it's fun for me to say that because my mother-in-law's name is actually Kim, but that's beside the point. There is some Christianity in North Korea. That is because Christianity is very, very common in South Korea, and that is probably due to the heavy impact and influence of American society and culture on South Korea because of historically our military presence is there. The Christianity that does exist in North Korea is highly restricted, and the fact that there are Christians that are permitted to be in North Korea is almost exclusively probably the result of propaganda showing how generous and understanding the North Korean dictatorship is of other religions. It's used as a propaganda tool, the existence of allowing Christianity to be there. They do not have concepts really of, at least within the official ideology of North Korea, of religious freedom the way we do. They would not frame it that way either. They would say that we are not intolerant of other religions. They would say they are protecting their society from the outside ideology of American imperialist capitalists. That's what they would say. They don't think that they're locking, restricting ideology. They think they're protecting them, is basically the basics there. DPRK is a highly militaristic society. Do I have my, let me see a minute, yeah. It's a highly militaristic society. As much as 1/3 of their population is enlisted at any given time, right? Is involved in the military in one way or another at any given time. And the military is highly celebrated in the media. If you are a critic of the military in the United States, you may say, well, we do the same thing here. No, we really don't. It's a much bigger part of their society and their culture. This is emphasized by the fact that they have universal conscription from the age of 17 to 30. All males and some females are required to be in the military in one way or another from the age of 17 to the age of 30. That's wild, right? So if you're male, and some women are required to be in the military. Now, conscription is not unique to And conscription means the military, the government says, hey, you over there, you have to be in the army, right? Not giving you a choice. We have a voluntary army in the United States. North Korea has a mandatory army. Israel also has a conscription system. I believe it's still mostly males. I'm not sure on the Israeli military, but they also require people to do military service there. We have not had even a draft since the Vietnam War. And that's as close as we've gotten to actually conscription in our society. Yeah. Now, if you put the militarization of North Korean society in terms of numbers of people, that is one metric, but it's also important to put it in terms of percentage of the population in active duty military, not just enlisted, but actually active duty. So the size of the DPRK military is 1.2 million people, with its total population being 25.5 million. That makes it the largest military on the planet in terms of proportion to the population. Their military, the people actively with guns ready to fight right now, is 5% of its total population. Compare that to the United States. The percentage of our population in the military in the United States, actively right now, the people with guns ready to go, is 0.4% of the population. It's less than half of our population. And their military is 1.2 million people. Our military is 1.3 million people. And their population is what? Dramatically smaller. The fraction built up in my head. You then compare this to a place like Russia with 144.5 million people, the size of their military being 900,000, we see here, right? So the Russian military is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th, right? The Russian military is actually smaller than the North Korean military. And it cannot be overemphasized enough how much North Korean society, and especially the leadership of North Korea, compares themselves constantly to the United States in being competition with the United States. Note the very similarity of the size of our militaries here, and note that this is a rounded out number and that this is a very specific number. It is entirely possible that the North Korean military today, right now, is actually larger than the American military. That's entirely possible because they don't communicate these numbers. That's kind of a secret, right? Now, given our military also probably doesn't communicate exactly how many people. I mean, they probably do, but they're very, very similar numbers there. That's because North Korea is comparing themselves to us and trying to be and beat the American military. That is really re-emphasized in the documentary we're watching with the leader of that society almost perpetually comparing themselves to the United States. The United States, we don't do that in the United States, right? We sometimes think about North Korea, right? Sometimes, and if you're in the Army and it's like your job to be a military analyst, maybe it might be like 5th on your list of armies to compare ourselves to, right? North Korea, all day, every day, their leadership is in the business of comparing to the United States. But really, you then compare to the UK, which is very much the United States. We have a massive, very technologically advanced military. When you compare really the UK with 600, and I was like a fun trivia thing. The population of the UK is currently 66.6 million people, which is a fun bad luck number. The size of the military is 148,000 people. So the percentage of the population in the UK is about 2%, 0.2% of their population is their military. That is much more standard around the world. These militaries up, and they're not even really even on the map. These are, everyone on this chart are highly militaristic societies. And the reason that India and China have much larger militaries is because they have much larger populations than we do, right? And so, yeah, definitely the United States and North Korea are far more militaristic than China and India actually are when you consider that stuff. Anyway, though, away from the sociologist rambling about numbers, this is qualitative information. The military is highly celebrated within DPRK. It is the focus of movies, festivals, parades, and holidays. And, you know, we do that in the United States too, right? We have Memorial Day. We have the 4th of July, which is kind of a militaristic holiday, a little bit, but it is so much more in North Korea. They have these military parades that, you know, Donald Trump was criticized for wanting to have a military parade in the United States. And that's because that is not really something culturally that we do in the United States. But in North Korea, they absolutely do that. And that is part of their culture. And a couple times a year, they have thousands of troops march by in the capital with these massive tanks and all that. The North Korean movie and cinema complex, they actually have a highly developed theater system, not theater, studio system in North Korea. That's because actually Kim Jong-il was really super, he loved movies and that sort of thing. So under his reign, he built up their capacity to make movies. And there's two major genres of movies that come out of North Korea. There's military movies and big kaiju, big monster Godzilla type movies. Those are the two big movie types that come out of North Korea. For the vast majority of its history, DPRK has been at war since 1950, and that era, that was also true during the World War II era. They haven't actively been at war. I'll talk about that in a second. The party is also very important in North Korea. This party is the only legal political party in DPRK. Party membership is not mandatory for North Korean citizens, but it's something that if you lived in North Korea, you would want. It would be desirable because party membership determines what you can get in terms of types of employment, in terms of restaurants or stores that you could shop in, and other quote unquote things we would not consider benefits, things we would consider almost rights, that they would consider benefits. This type of benefit system with party status and the official party status was also present in the Soviet Union and in past eras of communist China. So this is not unique to DPRK, but the fact that it still exists and it is this way makes it kind of a very interesting historic cultural artifact. One of the major things you'll see in the documentary also is this kind of historic artifact element of North Korea, that not only are they communist, but they're like 1950s version of communist, right? That's a very interesting element to their society. That is not to say that there are not political conflicts in DPRK, but those political conflicts are more likely to be hidden by the government than they are to be highly public. Like our political conflicts in the United States are super highly public, right? That's I won't say transparent, but visible version of our society. DPRK, they do not do that sort of thing unless they're saying how evil and wicked the United States is. That's as visible as it gets, but that's kind of the public apparatus of it there. Political dissent is forbidden in DPRK, right? They do not have a freedom of speech in their country the way we have it here. This is rooted in a Stalinist idea that any anti-communist thinking is the result of outside capitalist influence. There is a very direct line of ideological belief in what exists in North Korea today to Stalinism in the Soviet Union in the 1940s. Right? So the government and party censors all sources of media in an attempt to eliminate what it considers ideologically impure thought, right? Because they believe that if you don't believe in the party, if you don't believe in the leader, if you don't believe in the Jewish ideal, you must have been corrupted by American capitalist forces, right? That's kind of the ideological thought there, which is obviously very different than how we perceive it in the United States. It's interesting to note that much of the black market in the DPRK consists of flash drives containing foreign media, right? So by the same people that in our society like sell drugs and sell people for sex slavery, well, in DPRK they do that with like Disney movies and The Simpsons and stuff. It's pretty wild. Now, these are not images from North Korea. I am getting somewhere with this. The party has this is more of about a concept within sociology, concept known as groupthink. This is the danger of the one-party system to a society, is the tendency toward groupthink. Groupthink is defined as a tendency of groups to make increasingly bad decisions if leadership is not able to be questioned, or if all members of a group think too similarly, right? That's the danger. And this exists on the micro level, exists on the meso level, exists on the macro level, right? So here we see examples of groupthink among American cults in the micro level. Here we have the extreme, I can't remember the exact name of the cult. These are extreme fundamentalist Mormons, very different than standard mainstream Mormons. These people are all the wives of, I can't remember the name of this specific guy, but it's very interesting. Their religion and their beliefs, they're Christian-oriented beliefs, but their beliefs and the religion doesn't have to do so much with the colors of clothing they wear. It might have to dictate a little bit the types of dress, but what I find most interesting about this group is that they all have the same haircut, right? That wasn't dictated by their leader. And I've read into this a little bit. I can't remember the name of the group right now, but all their hair is all the same, right? Like it's all the same. And we see similarly in the Manson family, among that cult in the 1960s. This is a picture of members of the Manson family cult surrounding their trial after those murders in the 1950s. And you will also note they all have the same hair length. They're all wearing the same clothes. And that behavior probably is not absolutely dictated, right? So the leader might say something once, hey, I like these couple colors. Hey, Charles Manson probably said something along the lines of, I like it when girls' hair is long, right? And that's it, right? And they just took it that to the extreme of thinking absolutely the same. Does that make sense? That all? Is my point made? Okay, good. Now, I make this public service announcement because as college students, you actually are demographically prone to getting swept up in cults, actually. So here's some signs, and cults usually don't say that they're cults. So here's some signs that you're in a cult. First of all, they take all your money. Or they say, hey, we're having classes. You can do this whole weekend, and we are teaching you the ways of the universe. It only costs $8,000, right? Or to go to the next level of enlightenment, it only costs so many or money, right? And to advance in the religion, it costs money to do that. Or another way could go is like, hey, yeah, we're just taking care of you. So just give us all your money and we'll take care of you, right? That's one indication you're in a cult. Another indication you're in a cult is that it doesn't allow you to contact your friends or family, or it encourages you to cut off ties from people who are not specifically members of the religion. That's actually a far more common way and beginner's way of cult behavior in the United States. They might take your money a little bit later, but this is one of the early things it does. It says, cut out those negative influences in your life. Just associate yourselves with members of this group and this way of thinking. That's a warning sign you're in a cult. And then the third one is that leadership is not to be questioned, right? Those people who are in charge, they are morally upright, they should be there, you can't question them. That's another major indicator that you are in a cult. Now, cults don't have to strictly be religious. They typically are religious, but a good example, if you're a podcast listener, there have been some great podcasts on the NXIVM cult. NXIVM is an example of a cult that actually was structured like a multi-level marketing campaign. And not specifically religiously. Also, there have been political groups that have been very similar to cult-like as well. And on a societal level, Jewish ideal, and it's effectively a hugely massive cult, effectively, is the way it's structured and the way it behaves. Cults are super interesting. We just don't really have the time to go into it in super detail. So referring to DPRK and groupthink, there's a really primo example of groupthink in North Korea that happened around a structure known as the West Sea Barrage. It's also known, if you want to learn more about it, as the Nampo Dam. So this whole structure was based off of that Jewish ideal concept of extreme self-sufficiency. So it was based on the idea that North Korea should be highly productive and highly able to take care of itself, right? Well, the idea, and this was Kim Jong-il's idea, was to build a dam that would separate the Taedong River, which is a massive river in North Korea, and separate it from the Yellow Sea where it empties into, right? So this is the equivalent of if they tried to build a massive dam at the mouth of the Mississippi River where it enters the Gulf of Mexico, and they try to basically separate out. You can see how this looks like the ocean. What they try to do is they try to separate out the ocean from the river and desalinate this water and make it drinkable and make it able to grow increased crops with and generate electricity. And those are all, in theory, an amazingly good idea, right? That's highly desirable, and you can make so much more food and you can give so much more water to people. However, they screwed up real bad, right? And it didn't actually make all this fresh water over here and keep this as salt water. What it actually did was it didn't drain properly. And what happened was it flooded a good portion, a large portion of their rice crop. And this occurred, and the dam was ready in the early 90s, and that famine occurred in the mid 90s, and that famine probably occurred, of course the North Korean government would never say this, but it probably occurred because of the West Sea barrage. That's probably why it occurred. And I guarantee, I know this I don't have proof of it, but I know it, right? There had to have been engineers working on that project. There had to have been physicists. There had to have been electrical engineers. There had to have been a whole lot of people working on this project that saw it coming, right? But they either thought, well, the great leader definitely would know, right? He definitely would. He would know, he has it under control, right? They thought that way, or they said, I'm not saying anything because I'll be shot and maybe thrown in I will be killed, right? That is what groupthink looks like on the macro level, right? So on the micro level, it would look like you dressing like everyone else in the cult. But on the macro level, it looks like the country and making and causing a famine. That's an idea? Groupthink? Yeah, okay. If you are a highly literately minded person, literature, this concept groupthink actually was originated by Orwell in 1984. Sociologists, we actually took the term from Orwell because it was a very good observation and is backed up social scientifically. So in terms of international relations, if you know anything about North Korea, you know that they have a bad relationship with the United States. Relations between North Korea and the United States have always been bad because North Korea was put into existence after World War II. And the reason why North Korea came into existence is because the Soviet Union occupied the North after World War II because the Japanese had originally invaded the peninsula, and I actually, that's the extent of my knowledge there. I don't actually, now that I'm talking about it, I don't know if the peninsula was its own kingdoms or part of China at that time. I'm not sure now that I bring it up. But anyway, all this stuff really happened in the aftermath of World War II. And there of this carving up behavior that the United States and the Soviet Union were doing in what they thought might be World War III between the Soviet Union and the United States. So we saw similar behavior in West Germany and East Germany, right? Well, and so basically East Germany was Soviet dominated, North Korea was Soviet dominated, South Korea was American dominated, West Germany was American dominated. At that moment in time, East Germany and North Korea were actually relatively similar societies. And then the Korean War broke out from 1950 to 1953, which in modern terms was a relatively short war. In 1950, relations between the North and South broke down, and this was largely due to international pressures. The reason why the Korean War happened is because that became a proxy war of the Cold War, right? So North Korea was backed by the Soviet Union and the Chinese, which were both communist countries, and South Korea was backed by the United States and other NATO allies, but largely the United States. Both North Korea and South Korea were provided with troops, supplies, and weapons by their superpower counterparts, right? So there were, for example, and my grandpa, who was in the Korean War, he attributes his bad hearing to the bombs that were dropped by the Chinese Air Force, because North Korea at that time did not have its own Air Force. The Chinese were dropping the bombs for them. Just like the South Korea didn't have its own Air Force, the Americans were dropping their bombs for them. Yeah. While this war was relatively short, the war was difficult for the United States in a way that World War II was not difficult, right? So the American military of that era was built for the battles of the plains of Europe, right? So for tanks and that kind of infantry, that kind of army men, right? It was really oriented for fighting in Europe, right? This allowed, additionally, North Korea was mountainous, right? So you had a military that was oriented for plains, but trying to fight in the mountains. So that effectively allowed the North Koreans to hunker down and basically build fortresses to not let the United States get in at all. And the winters were especially hard, and they would be, there are a lot of the soldiers that died in North Korea on the American side, they died of disease, they died of hypothermia. That's where most of the deaths from the North Korean War, happened, was from that stuff, not from actually getting killed. Yeah, that's what happened in that war. In 1953, and this is kind of what makes the Korean War unique in American history, a ceasefire was declared between the North and the South, right? So the Americans saw this as being a stalemate, as being a tie, right? They didn't like it, right? The military obviously didn't like not winning, but they saw it as a tie. But the North Koreans saw this as being a victory, right? Because they shut down this big American military. And additionally, and we still see this in the propaganda of North Korea, they still say that they intend to unite the Korean people, right? And what do they mean by unite? They mean by they will invade eventually, is how you could probably interpret that. Interestingly, in this conflict, peace was never actually established. In strictly technical terms, North Korea and South Korea are still technically at war. They're just at a ceasefire and not actively firing guns. And that has created an area known as the demilitarized zone, the DMZ, in between North Korea and South Korea. And it's highly militarized. There are fences and lands and secret tunnels and all of that. They're not actively shooting at each other, but they are still in a condition and state of war. That didn't happen in Vietnam, for example. In Vietnam, the communist forces eventually won and drove the United States out. The United States could have kept fighting, but there wasn't the political will to do that still in the United States, and that's what ended that war. But we aren't still at war with Vietnam, and actually our relations with Vietnam are kind of okay now. You can, for example, you can go to Vietnam, again, don't do anything of that right now, but after the pandemic's over, maybe consider a vacation to Vietnam, but you can't do that to North Korea. You can actually travel to North Korea today. Don't do it though, because it's super dangerous and you might not come back. Yeah. Anyway, though, the Cold War ended in 1991. So this is when communism broke down in the Soviet Union. Remember, the Soviet Union was not just Russia. The Soviet Union was also all of these little countries, a lot of countries, and and right there too. It was this whole mass. It wasn't just Russia. So non-Russian countries in the Soviet Union at the end of the Cold War, they broke away from Russia. That was a major change. East Germany and West Germany reunited, right? There was a moment actually when North Korea and South Korea also could have reunited, but the Kim family did not give up their power. So that's why that stayed separated. The remaining communist countries were faced with the loss of international infrastructure, right? So all of these countries in the Soviet Union, they became not communist anymore. And then countries like China, with like Cuba, like North Korea, they were faced with, well, what do we do, right? How do we be in the world without the Soviet Union? At a bare minimum as a trading partner, right? China, the way they adapted is they start to build capitalist industry. They allow businesses, the way we understand business to be, to exist in their country in a way that didn't really exist prior to the end of the Cold War. Cuba also started to open up a little bit and embrace European tourism, American tourism a little bit, but mostly European and South American tourism. So that's how Cuba changed. North Korea, on the other hand, in a different turn of events, they doubled down on ideology. They really, when other countries opened up, they said, no, 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 we are becoming, we have this Jewish ideal, right? And we are going to be self-sufficient on our own. We're going to be an island of ourselves, right? And that's how they adapted. And that explains a lot of, effectively, their behavior in the world. During the 1990s, relations between North Korea and South Korea, and North Korea and the United States got even worse. That famine that I mentioned hit in the 1990s, and it was the famine was probably created by a project of Kim Jong-il, right? So that's ideologically a problem, right? That something he did caused millions of people to die. North Korea in that famine refused to accept international famine relief, especially relief from the United States. We could have helped millions of people from starving to death, but they were so ideologically set from outsiders helping them, and they thought we were going to spy on them. In all honesty, we probably were going to spy on them, right? They were set against that, but as a result of that, millions of people died. The best estimate is that maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 million people died in that famine, but we really don't know how many people died. We simply don't know. There's footage in the documentary we're going to watch of really empty countrysides where there should probably be people. It is entirely possible that those areas that are abandoned might be abandoned because everyone starved to death in the famine. The documentary we're watching takes place less than a decade after that famine hits. So that's a distinct possibility. And then to bring it absolutely up to the modern day, obviously in the 2000s, there was the whole weapons of mass destruction argument between the United States and North Korea under the Bush administration. And then that eventually faded away, and we realized that it had nothing to do with Islamic fundamentalism. And then there was the kind of the stunty stuff with Dennis Rodman going to North Korea and trying to make friends in his kind of clumsy celebrity way. And then we see a similar kind of thing, honestly, with the Trump administration doing a similar kind of thing, just kind of theatrics. I took this up to the absolute modern day. I took it up to 2020. There was a little back and forth between North Korea and the United States in June of this year. The Trump administration thought they were doing a great job and saying, oh yeah, we're going to build relations with North and South Korea. Just recently in June, the North Korean government denounced the United States again and said the efforts of the Trump administration have been meaningless, and they're going to continue with their nuclear program. So that's what you get from North Korea. Honestly, the nature of their society, not the people, mind you, this means nothing about the people in North Korea, but their government is inherently set up against us, right? It's against American society. Their government actively says they won't be satisfied until we're destroyed, which makes for difficult international relations. Yeah, any questions or comments or whatever? No? Yeah, 3 hours is tough, even if you are in your own living room and fully comfortable. So that is the end of today. And hopefully that gave you some grounding for the stuff we're going to do again. Last time, I'm going to remind you, next Tuesday, we will not have class on Monday. If you can't make it to be with us next Tuesday, I hope you can. I think it's going to be pretty cool. There will be a recording of that as well, posted hopefully by Wednesday. So are there any questions before we head out?
I have a question.
Sure, Bailey.
Okay. So the quiz we have to take, is that just over this week and last week's material? And then when is that due?
So that, so that is due Sunday. So this Sunday after, Sunday. And at 11:59, and that is just chapter 3.
Was chapter 3?
Yeah. So there isn't a quiz every single week. Most weeks have a quiz. Those weeks that are not covered in quizzes, that will be made up for in the exam. Yes, I heard someone else.
Thank you.
With a question.
I think it was me. I had the same question as Bailey.
Okay. Yes, everyone's always very concerned with quizzes. Anything else? Do we think we know what we're doing this week? Comfortable? Okay, good. Final call for questions? Okay, everyone.
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask that. So, like, is the quiz like multiple choice or like short answers?
Oh, the quiz is multiple choice. Yeah, multiple choice. It is timed. You have 10 minutes to do it, right? So it's 5 questions. So that's 2 minutes each question, right? Multiple choice. Your vocabulary, study this lecture, and it'd be okay, but it is timed. Be aware of that. Anything else? I'm glad that came up. I'm glad I gave you that timed warning. So be sure to study a little bit before you actually do it. You won't have all the time in the world to do it. Yeah, so if anything comes up between now and Wednesday, I am doing my office hours and you have that information. I think we're good to go. So I'll see you guys later. Stay safe, keep wearing your masks. See ya.